Russia's COVID vaccine Sputnik, which isn't apparently trusted by the country's own doctors, is on the move to Eastern European countries. They say they can't get enough, or in some cases, any, and this is their only choice. China, too, is in the business of exporting to the same region. This is Roundtable. Company. I'm David Foster. So why is the queue for Western vaccines so long? And are both China and Russia using those shortages for their own ends to win influence in Eastern Europe?
Since the World Health Organization announced its vaccine rollout plan COVAX, Eastern European countries have been faced with a dilemma. The WHO has said it will help less developed countries with free vaccines, but that appears to be taking a long time. Countries therefore have a choice between BioNTech Pfizer, Moderna and AstraZeneca vaccines, or they accept China's Sinovac or Russia's Sputnik. But there have been doubts about whether the Chinese or Russian alternatives are any good. Approving Sinovac or Sputnik could also have wider implications, signaling possible closer ties to the provider of the vaccine. Belarus became the first country after Russia to approve the Sputnik vaccine, and Hungary was the first country in the European Union to approve the Sinovac vaccine. Serbia has been the most successful country in the region in terms of securing vaccines for its entire population by approving both Sputnik and China's Sinovac. Ukraine and Moldova are still waiting for the WHO's help. Meanwhile, Ukraine ordered almost 2 million Sinovac vaccines, while Albania and Kosovo managed to secure 500,000 vaccines from Pfizer. When it comes to EU solidarity, neighbouring Bulgaria has promised North Macedonia a donation from its own stock of vaccines. With many Eastern European countries still empty-handed, how will the race to secure vaccines impact the geopolitics of the region?
Well, time for us to welcome to the programme two guests who have yet to have a vaccine of any colour and original origin. We go to Belgrade, Serbia, where we see Strahinja Subotic, researcher at the European Policy Centre, and then to Warsaw in Poland. And we welcome back to Roundtable Wojciech Szabelski, editor-in-chief at Visegrad Insight. This is really for both of you, but Wojciech, I'm going to come to you first of all. Is this about a colossal, catastrophic European Union failure, or about great merchandising by both China and Russia?
Well, what we see is unprecedented effort by the European Union that never before has been designing common health policy response, and has been able to secure a common vaccination process for the big and the small countries of the European Union, which is, again, something that many of the members of the European Union would not be able to deliver themselves. The countries simply are too poor, too small to administer a relationship.
But be fair, there's been the most enormous criticism of the European Union for being very, very slow and leaving some countries out in the cold. And do you think that China and Russia have stepped into the breach?
Oh, definitely. They're using every opportunity and have been doing so for almost a year and a half, as we've seen it from a year's perspective when the pandemic has started. We have seen early on in spring 2020 how much effort both countries have been putting on advertising, launching PR campaigns about deliveries of medical supplies to Europe, and bragging. They were these media programs. They were bragging about how much worse Europe is coping in relationship to China and Russia. And then it was turning out that the medical supplies from China did not have certificates. Basically, they were not proper medical supplies that could be used on the markets in Central Europe. And Russia, when supposedly they were delivering some aid to Italy, In fact, they bragged about it, but in fact, what the Italian press has discovered by summer 2020, they were only shipping intelligence officers to penetrate apparently
Wow.
Italian infrastructure, but they were not
So
delivering.
empty planes and empty promises. Strahinja, let me bring you in. I'm going to talk about Serbia in more detail in just a moment. But generally, do you think China and Russia have played fair in this?
In terms of the European Union or Serbia? You mean on a European level?
Just overall in supplying or promising at least a number of vaccines to countries that couldn't get what they wanted from the European Union.
Well, for now, I'm sure that they would definitely like to export as many vaccines as possible, because this allows them to increase their soft power, which has been shaky throughout the past years, particularly as both countries have a weak rule of law and human rights record. So by assisting local citizens of Europe, they have intentions to actually boost their soft power. For now, as my co-speaker mentioned, both of their vaccines haven't been authorized by the European Medicines Agency. Yet we see countries such as Hungary breaking the ranks and actually welcoming those vaccines early on. So Hungary will actually rely on its own regulatory agency to decide whether those vaccines are ready to use. So in this regard, Hungary was the only one to break the ranks so far. There are other countries like Slovakia, Croatia that have ideas maybe to order those vaccines, but they've been more shy than Hungary. Hungary saw how well Serbia was doing, and that's why it stepped out and made orders.
When 52% of medical personnel in Russia were asked about the Sputnik vaccine, they said they would not, I beg your pardon, 52% of those medical personnel in Russia who were asked about this said they would not trust the vaccine. So why is it actually still being accepted in parts of Europe?
Well, I think that people are simply desperate. These are desperate times. They want to have any sort of assurance. So if the vaccine has maybe not 100% feasibility, or if it's not 100% good, maybe if it's 80%, if it works in 80% of cases or 70% of cases, for many countries that's better than having nothing. In the Western Balkans, except Serbia, almost none of the countries had no vaccines at all. So for politicians, this is also damaging, as it seems that they have no initiative. So by appealing to Russia and China, Europeans are actually able to portray themselves as being able to take some kind of action, even at the times of delays when it comes to Western vaccines.
Crikey, Wojciech, do you agree it is out of desperation only?
Yes, absolutely. There is no rationale in democratic countries. The public opinion would eat a politician alive if the politician would not try every possible opportunity is offered or there is on the table to get vaccine. At the same time, some of the societies are already aware of the dangers of being misled by the countries that do not follow democratic rules and procedures and standards, and therefore they are not trustworthy. This is the case.
So what do you? No, my fault for interrupting. I'm just going to introduce something from the Russian ambassador to Serbia. You can both comment on it. This is Alexander Botsan-Chachenko saying that the prospect of a vaccine factory in Serbia does not mean that Russia is in competition with anybody.
Oh, yeah.
This clearly shows that Russia does not think about the vaccine as part of a global conflict or competition. Our aim is only to have friends, to have mutual relations and cooperate to reach the goal that unites us all, to overcome the coronavirus and the pandemic.
Well, Russia's saying it's simply about making friends, being compassionate. You don't buy that?
Definitely Russia says the right thing, but does it do the right thing? I'm not so sure. I mean, so far we have also seen that not only the medical doctors, but a diplomat, a Russian diplomat in Estonia, when asked about him being vaccinated, he said that definitely he's not getting vaccinated by Sputnik. He prefers Pfizer or any other of those that were approved by European medical services. So there is this serious doubt that the words of Mr. Ambassador in Serbia, the communication coming from Russia, is intentionally misleading, and I wouldn't therefore put much trust into what they're saying about their intentions.
Strahinja, since you happen to be in Serbia, you obviously knew of what the ambassador, the Russian ambassador there, had said. How well has that gone down in your country?
Well, first of all of the political officials, high officials of Serbia have publicly stated that all vaccines are actually properly functioning, that they're safe, and that they will be continuously distributed in the next period to local citizens. In that regard, even Serbian opposition leaders haven't been as vocal against Sputnik 5 vaccines or Sinopharm from China. So it appears that there is a consensus even among the medical experts in Serbia that all of these vaccines are actually safe for use. And that's why in Serbia there is a choice. There were in total 5 vaccines that were actually authorized by Serbian Medical Agency. And people have the choice to choose one of those and stay in line and wait, for example, for the Chinese one, or they can choose the Russian one, or Pfizer, or whatever they want. Or they can choose an option to have any of those. So in this way, the government is giving the choice to the people to choose their vaccines.
So no pressure on the people whatsoever, even though, you've mentioned Russia, even though Serbia's got very close, long-standing ties with China.
So our government isn't forcing people to, it's not mandatory to get a vaccine, but we can see a high turnout from the people. They are the ones who actually do want to take this vaccine. I think that even our government is utilizing the momentum, the fact that Serbia is actually one of the most successful countries, not only in Europe, but also in the entire world, based on the vaccination rate. I think that this actually encourages people to take the vaccines. When it comes to Russia, it is true, Serbia and Russia are really close allies. But interestingly enough, Russia is not only trying to outsmart the West and Western vaccines like Pfizer in Serbia, it is also competing against China, actually, and its Sinopharm vaccines. And I think that's one of the reasons why it wants to step up its game in Serbia and to show actually that Russia is able to build factories in Serbia which could package and distribute Russian vaccines. For now, Chinese haven't proposed such an idea, so I guess this is the way for Russia to show that it's a credible actor that can maybe maintain its soft power in Serbia and the political leverage.
Talking about competition, not just perhaps between China and Russia, but other nations as well. I'll stay with you for this one, Strahinja, if I may. Did you notice anything in the name of the Russian vaccine, Sputnik, that brought back to me memories of the space race with the United States back in the 50s and 60s?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting why they chose the name Sputnik, and they also have they have their own media agency who is actually really active in Serbia. It produces content in Serbia. They have their own radio, online presence, and they are becoming more and more influential, the Sputnik media broadcaster in Serbia. So it is a way for Russia to maybe play the card, playing the card of familiarity, using this name to maybe magnify its own impact in Serbia, particularly as the large number of population here, or in majority, do support not only Russia, but also its leader, Vladimir Putin.
Wojciech, going a stage further with this, if it's not just about competition between Russia and the United States or whomever, if it is about neighbors helping neighbors, if it is about countries in the EU buying in from outside, if it is about shortages, we are seeing to some extent a new kind of nationalism here, whereby Hungary will go to somebody else, Bulgaria will go elsewhere also, and so on, which is very fragmenting, very disorientating for the EU as a whole, perhaps.
It could be, potentially it could be, but I do not believe that, except for the government, the leadership of those countries, the societies would follow. So you see in Hungary, paradoxically, you have one of the most Euro enthusiastic, supportive for the European integration. The society is absolutely thinking and moving the opposite direction than Viktor Orban, not to mention his sliding down in the polls. But at the same time, his behavior, or the nationalist agenda he's proposing, also concerning vaccine, is all but to undermine the European Union project. It's something he's been trumping about for many, many years before, that he does not believe in it. He thinks it's going to fail, and he's going to use every opportunity to demonstrate that the European project, European further integration, is not something he will
But you
allow.
are saying that the Hungarian people don't necessarily follow that. What do they think of what their country is doing when it comes to vaccines from outside? They not care because as long as it comes in some shape or another?
No, people actually do not want to get vaccinated with Chinese or Russian vaccines. This is also why in Hungary, of all EU countries, this could be one of the main reasons for why vaccination is not progressing per capita as fast as in other countries. Of course, there are some surprising countries like Austria that is even lagging behind even more than Hungary in terms of vaccination per capita in per 100 people in the population. But that's still in a Hungarian case that is definitely not delivering. And I don't believe that with the influx of Chinese vaccination in the market, people all of a sudden will flock in lines to get the jab. I think it's going to be.
But correct me if I'm wrong here. Hungary's health system is so poor; they desperately need some kind of vaccination project to prevent hospitals becoming overwhelmed.
Yeah, but it's not about vaccine itself. It's not about the volume of vaccines that are too small or too many. The Hungarian public health service is inefficient. It's underfunded from bottom to top, and this system cannot cope with such a complex, fast, and requiring professional administration challenge as a mass vaccination. So this is a problem of Viktor Orban's government, which for many years was not investing enough in the reform of the public health system. I mean, yes, we see that all over the board. Medical system or public health system is a challenge everywhere around the world, but in particular in Hungary, this was at one of the lowest points across Europe, and now it is simply inefficient to deliver, even if it will have more.
Okay, so it needs a vaccine, and yet you have people there saying we're not going to take any vaccine at any price. Strahinja, if I come to you, is there a sense that Hungary could perhaps, and other countries perhaps, be penalized in some way for going outside the bloc to get what is needed to help their people, depending on how many countries we're talking about?
So in that regard, even though there is a rule that all member states should wait for European Medicines Agency to fully authorize the vaccines, there is actually one loophole in directive that was adopted in 2001, which actually states that member states can authorize on their own vaccines during emergency situations and pandemic, which, however, they would be fully liable for any potential consequences. So legally speaking, Hungary actually, I don't think it could be penalized by EU bodies for breaking the ranks, particularly as Hungary has legal right to authorize its own vaccines according to this directive. On the other hand, this does hurt the idea of European solidarity and potentially encourages other countries to break the ranks as well. So if Hungary actually manages to use the Chinese vaccines to quickly vaccinate its own population, this might encourage other member states to follow. So in a long shot, this could also maybe bring into question the European project. But for now, I don't think there could be any penalizing process for Hungary.
Can I get a little bit personal with you, first of all, Strahinja, on this? You mentioned the fact to me before we went on air, and I brought it up, that you haven't had the vaccine yet. You say in Serbia there is a choice. If you were offered the vaccine tomorrow, and at some point I imagine you will be, and you were offered either the Pfizer or the AstraZeneca, the Oxford AstraZeneca, or Sputnik or Sinovac, would you make a choice based on what you've said so far? Would you refuse to have either the Russian or the Chinese, or would you be okay with that?
Well, I talked to many people here in Serbia, and most of them that I personally know wanted to take the AstraZeneca or Pfizer vaccines. However, actually, the biggest supply is given by the Chinese, Most of our vaccines are actually given from China. It's above million and a half, while there is a small amount of Pfizer and AstraZeneca. So even though we can have a choice, if we choose only Pfizer or AstraZeneca, we can stay in line for ages. So for now,
would you wait rather than rushing to have either the Russian or the Chinese? Would you wait?
I actually like to wait for the European Medicines Agency to give its final say, me personally, but I would have understanding for those people who are elderly, who are in need of desperate situation, need help. I think it's legitimate for them to take any vaccine as long as it's a life or death situation. I don't see a problem there.
Wojciech, your personal opinion, if you don't mind giving it, and do you think some Europeans are being pushed into having a vaccine that perhaps they shouldn't?
I would definitely choose every vaccine, regardless of which production, provided that it's accepted by the European agency.
Okay. Do you think Europeans are being pushed into it?
I don't think there is going to be any political push. I saw that the European agency is open for, to certify, to go with the full procedure of certifying any vaccine that is proven to be working. So I would trust in the process here.
Okay, and what do you think the long-term results of this are going to be? Hopefully, many more healthy people, but we don't know when that's going to be. But in terms of any fallout, recriminations, what do you think is going to happen?
We've seen some of the fallout already. I mean, there is the criticism, there is disillusionment with the promises of the European Union. There was initially a lot of hope about the premiere of such a European opening for administering such a process, first time ever, and then there was disillusionment, but the fallout might be directed at the European Commissioner Ursula von der Leyen. She actually took the blame herself. I think it was a smart move because now whatever happens in the future, and most likely the vaccine will be coming in, will definitely be crediting her in a positive side, and then we'll want to remember the negative side of it. When it comes to this competition and how Russia and China pushes for application of their vaccine, the fallout might be if only there are irregularities about the process, the procedure, and eventually we may deepen a rift between those countries called by the European Union as systemic rivals and the European Union or the West.
Okay, so we have to wait and see what the efficacy of these Chinese and Russian vaccinations are going to be. But would you suggest that just by offering, just by providing, they have encouraged and managed to bring about closer ties, if you like, with Eastern European countries?
Well, not in particular cases of the Baltics, not in the case of Ukraine, for instance. So that is very interesting development. Ukraine, in particular, is a country that does not profit from the European Union vaccination program, does not have packages coming from the EU. It will wait and will wait long. And at the same time, it was offered Russian vaccine. The Kremlin's proposal was, however, rejected by the Ukrainian government with support of the society. Doesn't want to show that they are in any way dependent on Russia. Russia waging war on the territory of Ukraine, occupying Crimea. So
okay,
it's more nuanced.
Sorry, do finish, yeah.
I think it's just more nuanced than two blocks.
Okay, that's a very good point. Strahinja, let me come to you and pose the same question, because it's what we were really on about when we started this program. Are Russia and China trying to woo Eastern European countries? What we've got to answer now is, do you think they'll be successful?
Well, first of all, I need to touch upon one fact. Many people do blame Ursula von der Leyen and the Commission for its failure to secure fast vaccination rate. However, I would argue that actually this is a wrong position to use, because the Commission wasn't the only one negotiating these contracts with pharmacies.
Okay, Strahinja, I know what you're saying, but we've got to get to the point on this one because time is running out for us. Do you think Russia and China, if they set out to win Eastern European hearts, will have succeeded?
I would agree that they want to try, but I'm not sure how successful will they be. As we've seen recently, a 17+1 framework meeting where many of the highest officials from the 17 bloc Central and Eastern Europe countries have actually boycotted the meeting. They've sent lower ministers. So this is a signal actually that the Central and Eastern European countries will not automatically work with China and Russia in the future. They will actually have some conditions for them to cooperate with these countries.
Jolly good to hear from both of you. We've drilled down into the nitty-gritty. We've examined and decided, I think, that this is not a black and white picture. It is, as you both suggested, very nuanced. Thank you so much for your expertise on this. And from me, David Foster, to all of you watching this, wherever you happen to be, thank you for your company. We hope you'll join us next time on Roundtable. Until then, goodbye.